Now it was our turn to be the encore. We don't have anything left. We had digital audio tape of that. And we had all our songs on there. We exhausted to that. What are we gonna do? And that's when on the stage we decided, well, y'all wanna do a little practice song, if I ever, a little acapella practice song. And so, all right, let's do it. So we started that off. And by the second chorus, man, that rowdy crowd was actually singing the chorus, like having never heard it. And so when the curtains closed, right there on stage, like a movie or something, as soon as the curtains closed, we say, hey, yo, y'all want to get a record deal? My name is Garfield Bright, and I am undone, y'all.
Hello, friend. It is another great day to get better. Welcome back to another episode of Becoming Undone, the podcast for those who dare bravely, risk mightily, and grow relentlessly. Join me, Toby Brooks, as I invite a new guest each week to examine how high achievers can transform from falling apart to falling into place. I'll start this episode off by telling you a little story. I was a junior in high school. I was a drummer in my high school's marching and pep bands. Me and my bandmates had just finished playing before a girls' basketball game, and we percussionists were picking up our drums and our other gear when I happened to notice a new CD sitting on the bleachers. Now, you millennials and Gen Zers probably don't understand the etiquette involved back in the day when a friend got a new CD. You had to pick it up, give it a look, open the hinge, pull out the liner notes, appreciate it. I was a huge fan of rap, hip-hop, and the new-to-me surge in popularity of R&B. I'd quickly become a fan of all the Boyz II Men, Guy, Keith Sweat, and Belle Biv DeVoe I could find. I hadn't heard of the group that I was holding in my hands, but I was intrigued. Who could forget the four guys on the cover and that brightly colored hoodie? The name I wasn't quite sure how to pronounce. "Whose is this?" I asked. Fellow drummer and freshman John Jones piped up. "That's mine, leave it alone." John was a friend and a kid brother of my best friend Mark. "Can I borrow it?" I asked. "No way, I just got it." I was intrigued. I finally found a copy of my own a few days later. I popped it in my CD player. It was fantastic. Smooth harmonies, a few up-tempo tracks, a heaping helping of stuff to sing to your lady. I was a Shai fan from the moment my ears heard the art that they produced. So much so that I almost had a Shai song at my wedding. More on that later. And so much so that I purchased every album they ever released. Even after that scaldingly bright shine of a star that burst on the scene in 1992 eventually began to dim. One of the founders of that group, Garfield Bright, can only be described as a Renaissance man. What else could you call a guy who's gone multi-platinum, has a PhD, and sports an Instagram profile that is packed full of admiring fans still looking to get a glimpse of that childhood heartthrob? Listen in as we catch up with the groundbreaking artist who's since added author and educator to his long list of titles, Dr. Garfield Bright, in episode 51, Harmony. This week's guest is, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to fanboy a little bit here, kind of a dream come true, a huge fan of Shai, and then I'm also a PhD, so we're kind of crossing over some things here. So Dr. Garfield Bright, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Super cool. Well, the purpose of this show is to really shine a spotlight on the fact that lots of times stuff doesn't go the way we scripted it. Lots of times we face setbacks, we face adversity, but instead of bemoaning those and complaining or woe is me, those are oftentimes the things that really catapult us to our next level of success. And so love the story of Shai. So we'll kind of start there, maybe even a little bit before there, but also the years since then and the things you've done. So I always kind of toss a softball out there to begin with. What did you want to be growing up?
Man, I remember when I was real young playing with Legos. I fancied myself a future architect. I was real athletic, so I always, held the cream, so to speak, for anything athletic. I had some good athletic gifts, so I just figured that was going to be a part of my, my trajectory. But for some reason, neither of those manifested. But
right. I always think it's interesting. Artists always want to be athletes, and athletes always want to be artists. But it's a rare individual that can do them both. So obviously, where I came across your work and your artistry, your group, I was a junior in high school in 1992 when the first album dropped. But there's more to the story than that. You burst on the scene as an overnight success, but there's way more to it than that. So start at the beginning for you, wherever that was.
Well, I was just, to give you some kind of context, I guess, for me in terms of my musical foray. I love music, fervent, avid music guy. But my household, unlike most black guys who end up in the music industry, I didn't have a gospel kind of background or anything like that. My dad played straight ahead jazz in the house. And so my ear for music was amalgamation of jazz, hip hop of the day, because I had my first set of turntables and I had UTFO, and then I had The Word Is Out. The beats went together real good, so Roxanne was getting mixed with that. And I thought I was going to be a DJ. I was in music that way. So I love to hear music, but if I couldn't hear it on the radio, I would just start singing it. But once again, what I would be pulling from is those jazz kind of chops. So I had this real fixation for harmony. And when I would hear anything, and I'm listening to jazz influence growing up, I would try to hear the harmonic. I would try to understand what the bass line was doing and why they picked those notes in the bass line when the main melodies of those chords in the jazz were doing something seemingly different. I'm wondering, how is this bass line guy even hearing those notes to be compatible with? Like that intrigued me as a 6-7-year-old. So anything that I would ever hear musically, I would just instantly try to do a harmonic with it, no matter what genre of music it was in. My reflex was that.
Now, allow me to slowly climb up onto my Generation X soapbox and point out some stuff Garfield just said here, friend. First, just listen. It's not hard to see why when Shai burst on the scene in 1992, ladies all over the world were going crazy for the velvety smoothness of the 4-part harmony that Garfield helped create. I could listen to him read the federal tax code aloud and find myself entertained. And I'm as straight as they come. Next, lots of us olds like to complain about auto-tune and the lack of artistry in modern music. Garfield grew up literally immersed in jazz and found himself drawn to other genres like hip-hop and R&B early on as he grew up. And that helped him grow as a young musician, always looking to further hone his craft. It would be those years of practice and research and listening and experimenting that would eventually allow him and the other members to become overnight successes. There are no shortcuts to artistry, and Garfield's journey proves that sometimes it takes years of hard work alone before we ever get the opportunity to shine for the masses.
So that was just for fun. That was just me, but no aspirations. I get to college, go to Howard University, major in political science, minor in history, ultimately. First, I was a science major, but anyway, long story. But Darnell and I were freshman roommates, and Darnell comes from this big, huge musical background. He was in the band. He was there early, just like I was, because he was in band camp. He was much like the guy from Drumline, except he played trumpet. Like, he was a real prodigy, and as a freshman, he was making up Howard's dance steps. So he had his dexterity was off the hook. He could play the trumpet real well, but he could play bass guitar, the piano. He was a real musical guy. He was my roommate. So his dad was a social worker at this high school called Eastside High School in New Jersey, in P-Town. And that's the same school from Lean On Me, the movie Lean On Me with Joe Clark. Darnell actually went to that school. And his homeboys were the guys in the bathroom singing in Fair East Side, that song.
Now, it's been a long time since I watched the movie Lean On Me, and I had forgotten about the song East Side High. When Garfield mentioned it, I had to look it up. Take a listen for yourself.
You don't want to go in there, Mr. Clark. It stinks.
My. Aren't you my little songbirds from the cafeteria? Well, I'm sure you've learned the school song by now. You'd better know it, because this time, if you don't get it right, you're suspended for 10 days each. Now, is that clear? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
All right, then. The school song. Let me hear it.
All right, fellas. Let them hear it.
Fair East Side. Fair East Side. Fair East Side. By thy side will stand and always praise thy name. Praise thy name, praise thy name. To ever, yeah. Lend a hearts and hands to help increase thy fame. Ooh, Lord, the honor, yeah, of old East Side High, cause forth our loyalty. Loyalty. So cheap.
All right. Who taught you that?
I don't know about you, but I had goosebumps right there. This clip is from the movie Garfield alluded to, Lean On Me. But it wasn't the actors and artists that you hear from the movie that Garfield's freshman roommate and eventual Shai co-founder, Darnell Van Rensselaer, was friends with. It was the actual group the movie was based on, Riff, from Paterson, New Jersey. So while Garfield brought musical chops and influence of his own, fortunately for us, fate helped him cross paths with another incredible musician in Darnell. But it wasn't straight from freshman year to superstardom. There were some steps and some adversity in between.
Darnell's dad was their manager and the social worker. So we had all these songs by the group Riff in advance. And me and Darnell used to go out in the alleyway between our dorm and the girls' dorm on Friday nights and sing songs, sing Riff songs. The girls had a balcony. They would lean out and be looking at us sing these songs, and we'd be wooing the crowd. And our other roommate named Antonio was a saxophone player. So we had 3 guys in there that were musical, and the girls were loving it. So that was our inspiration, is like the girls kind of like, adoration at the end of a Friday night with a couple of brews to feel that. So that in my mind, so Darnell and I, we had that little magic. And then he and I went separate ways, like sophomore, junior year. We moved out of that dorm. And so I got another dorm. He moved into another dorm. They assign you each year in the housing lottery or whatever. So they put him in another dorm. And then in that time period, as he grew into a young man, he pledged a fraternity called Alpha Phi Alpha with the other 2 guys in Shai, Mark and Carl. And I went on a whole other trajectory. Like I became real political. I joined a quasi-Black Panther kind of organization called Black Neoforce, the head of which is now the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Raz Baraka. I also ran for Howard University Student Body Association president, liberal arts vice president. Like I was involved in that kind of stuff. And, I was doing my thing. And later on, like junior year, we ran back into each other after having kind of grew into ourselves. And it was like late one night in front of Fine Arts. And Darnell had been practicing with the 2 other guys. They had a group called Beta. There's a big talent show coming up at Howard, much like the Apollo, but because it was rowdy. Like the New York guys that liked to boo at the Apollo, they were at Howard. And then the football player guys who just wanted to just do something rowdy anyway on a Friday night with a few brews in their system, they were there being rowdy. So to win that crowd over was a big deal. And so we were in there, all this tremendous talent. Luckily, by the luck of the draw, not because we were the headliners, but I think we went last just because we were just last. And by that time, the muscle had worn out, the boo reflex had worn out on all the rowdy people. And so they actually listened to what we had to sing. We sung all these Boyz II Men songs. But before we get to that show, it was like 5 of those guys rehearsing. My dad had claimed me on his taxes. And so I lost my financial aid, even though I was married at the time. And so I lost my financial aid for Howard, but I still had my housing. So instead of going to school, I was going to the Fine Arts Building with Darnell every day for like 2 or 3 months, watching him rehearse with those fellas, knowing that a big show was coming up. I guess a couple of them got cold feet right before the show. And they went from 5-part harmony to like just 3 people. And now they actually missing a part. So Darnell was like, yo, G, man, you've been here every day, like soaking this in. I know you know at least the bass parts or something. And I was like, yeah, I do know the bass line. So I agreed to jump on there with him right before the show. We were the only group that didn't get booed. And that was my moral victory. I just didn't want to get booed. But it went from not being booed to getting an encore. And so we had run out. We were doing all these Boyz II Men covers. Now it was our turn to be the encore. We don't have anything left. We had digital audio tape of that. And we had all our songs on there. We exhausted the that. What are we going to do? And that's when on the stage we decided, well, y'all want to do a little practice song, if I ever, a little a cappella practice song. And so, all right, let's do it. So we started that off. And by the second chorus, man, that rowdy crowd was actually singing the chorus. Wow. Like having never heard it.
And if I ever fall in love again, I will be sure that the lady is a friend.
And they were really just singing our chorus, our little homegrown song. These people were moved to the point of knowing the words and singing it. Yeah. This hard crowd. And so when the curtains closed, right there on stage, it's like a movie or something. As soon as the curtains closed, we say, hey, yo, y'all want to get a record deal?
It's been said that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And Shai's story, and more specifically Garfield's story, is a fantastic example of how setbacks can be blessings in disguise. First, he finds himself unable to stay enrolled at Howard University for a semester due to a financial aid issue, which obviously would be hard to take. Undeterred, Garfield instead uses the semester of no classes as an unstructured internship of sorts, immersing himself in the music that he, his friend Darnell, and his new friends Carl, Mark, and some others were working on. When it came time to debut in front of a notoriously rowdy crowd, a couple of members of the group failed to show. So the group that would later become Gasoline Alley recording artists Shai took the stage. Darnell, Carl, Mark, and Garfield. The quartet quickly won the crowd over with several covers of Boyz II Men songs. They were so well received that they performed everything they'd prepared with a backing track, ultimately deciding to break out what would become their highest charting single in group history, If I Ever Fall in Love, which would eventually reach number 2 on Billboard's Hot 100, and it would be the signature cut on their platinum album by the same name in 1992. Some might call it luck. I'd call it destiny. Shai was born. All they needed was a record deal.
And then everybody was like, word, let's try. And we were on the avenues of Americas maybe within the next couple of weeks, auditioning for major labels, getting dissed. They were smoking cigarettes while we were singing a cappella, all that. We came back to D.C., WPGC radio station, had a softball game with the community. You know, the radio station wants to ingratiate themselves with the community and stuff, so they'll play go there and play a sport. And, you know, they bring everybody out, the portable studio. And we handed them a tape. Next thing you know, man, they loved it so much, and the people, the radio world and the people from D.C. were calling in so much requesting it that it broke into their major rotation. And being a major station that has sister stations as well as other little stations that copied their playlists, our songs started charting because of the rotation play that we were getting. And that piqued the interest of the MCAs of the world. And our final test was whether or not we could create something that was compatible for program directors who didn't want to just play an original a cappella song by some guys just out of college. If they needed more of a track to go in between their other tracks of their, songs that they had in playlists. So we came up with the If I Ever music version, and the label was enthralled by that one, and that's what pushed us over the top, and they gave us a record deal as opposed to a single. And then, from there we took off like crazy, man. It was just insane. And so even though I never fancied myself somebody that was going to be in some music career, there was a whole lot more people, more talented and probably more worthy and all that who aspired to do it since day one. Here I am, just in the right place, hanging with Darnell in Fine Arts. Next thing you know, I'm on Arsenio and Jay Leno singing Comforter and stuff. Like, oh my God, yo.
Yeah.
So that's how that kind of went.
So baby, I'm yours if you want me, and if you want to. So baby, I'm yours if you need me. Loving you forever if you want me. Give me a baby, I'm yours.
Obviously, the music industry's changed. For an aspiring young artist today, they're building a social media presence. It's all self-promotion.
Yeah.
That didn't exist then.
Not at all.
For you to perform and have that glimpse and that taste of, we could do this, actually getting a record deal, a lot of closed doors in between. Like you said, you got disrespected, you got shown the door. What was that process like for you and the rest of the group? Were you really just zeroed in knowing that you were going to be successful, or did doubt creep in along the way?
Man, let me tell you something. Like, how some kind of way, like, you'll see little babies playing in the playground and somebody will kick a kickball and it'll go over there by the baby. It'll bounce all around them. The baby is none the wiser. The ball never touches the baby. And I'm talking about, it's like, if that thing had hit that baby, it would have knocked his head off and the baby has no idea. Like, sometimes you're protected in your naivety is my point. And like, we really thought just because we had a song that was like incredible to us, at least, like, yo, this is the joint, we thought just because that's what it was, that should get a record deal and we should be successful in the music industry. And it was crazy because it really played out that way. But once we got in, we realized how stacked the odds were against what happened to us actually happening. Like that's like a 1 in a billion thing that happened to us. But in our minds, of course it's going to happen. You hear the song? Are you tripping? What? Not knowing that so many, if I can make a parallel, so many Michael Jordan, like songs that are on the level of Michael Jordan get created that never see the basketball court, metaphorically speaking, never see the radio station, it's so many dope songs that y'all never heard before, that y'all never hear, that are probably crazier than all the best songs you've ever heard, that will never see the light of day. Just because they are good don't mean there's so many things, so many intangibles, so many ancillary details and stuff that go into making that become entrenched in the industry and then charting and then actually becoming what the potential, living up to potential.
Yeah.
And so we actually had that happen to us. And it was like naivety. We thought it was supposed to happen. So when it happened, we were just validated, of course, So we never even thought about having something waver our confidence because we had something so far beyond confidence at that moment. It was like, we just knew we were getting a deal. Like, it was not even like, we didn't even put no thought into like if no more. Like, we knew that first go around the Avenue of Americans when they closed the door, they were tripping in our mind. Oh, they tripping. You know what I'm saying? They'll see. And it did came around like that. A lot of those execs like came up to us later on after we had got in the industry. We were part of the inside crew. Like, how come y'all never stopped by our offices? And I'm in my mind like, yo, we sang for you and you on the phone with a cigarette. Like, in my mind, I didn't do it to him, but I could have. But yeah, I mean, just it was like, man, like you can't even imagine. Like, it was.
Well, the second thing that comes to mind is you have this experience, and you get this glimpse of what stardom could be like. How far did you let yourselves go with this idea of becoming an R&B star?
It blew up instantly. Like, we were on top fast. Like, immediately, as soon as the song came out, like MCA, Randy Phillips in particular, who was the head of Gasoline Alley, that was a joint venture with MCA, not a subsidiary, but he had enough power that he had all the connects with MTV over in Europe. And he was very well connected, especially Europe. So immediately, because we were his act, he sent us over to Europe to do the rigors, all the stuff you do to lay the foundation. But we went to Europe first. We didn't start in the United States. We were U.S. group. Our song was taken off, but the physical entity known as Shai was over in Europe just doing it. So we were over there. It was just immediate smash. Like, we were doing stuff like this show called Top of the Pops that was like, huge over there. And we were immediately on that show. Like, over there, our credibility was just incredible. So we were just on a real fast track up. I mean, we were taking a Concorde jet from Paris to New York to do the first MTV Unplugged pilot. Like, it was just a crazy ride. But in the United States, like, we were just a song, albeit a popular song. Nobody had seen us until we finally came back and shot videos.
Right.
But the success of us was so meteoric and big. I was always who I was to me in my mind, especially having never aspired to do this in the first place. To me, I always looked at it as being in the bonus round of the video game, like living I knew what I was in when it was happening. That never like made me become somebody else in that space. Like, I was just G in that space, realizing that just G is somebody too, but this space is some crazy stuff and I'm enjoying the ride. I never looked at myself as I am whatever that is up there in that circle. I was just enjoying it for what it was. So when the star dimmed a little bit, I was kind of cool with it because I knew at some point you can't be in the bonus round of the video game, So I was, but I had fun on the ride, you know what I mean? But it never defined me because I was already somebody, and that style of thinking, I think, is what allowed me to go back to school, get my master's, my PhD, because I was already that. In my mind, I was that anyway.
Right.
But I can't undo what happened to me in terms of being a part of Shai. People, relate to me and recognize me as that in their mind. The people who know me from that's what I am to them. Yeah. And so that's funny to me because I am that, but it's like, damn, that's crazy. I'm that,
Well, there's definitely snippets of your story where it would appear to just be luck. Like, somebody from university housing just happened to put you together. But there's more to it than luck, because the preparation, like you said, you're a 7-8-year-old practicing hard work. So you're able to step in
and
when that opportunity comes along.
I did draw upon that for sure. And thank God, because there was a big curve with all those intricate harmonies, and then we got to do them live. And the only show Shai as an entity did before we got a record deal was that show. It wasn't like we did a whole lot of shows and got that in, and then we did one show. Next thing you know, we getting a deal. We have to like learn, and the album was done in 2 weeks. So even though we sang those songs, and a lot of those songs happened to be songs that we had originally done in the sound rooms in the Fine Arts Building, like the piano accompaniment, but they were basically a cappella songs that we retrofitted, a track to once the label told us we only had 2 weeks to do this album because they wanted to be able to sell If I Ever on the album for $20 as opposed to just a single.
Yeah.
So they put pressure, but by default, we got a chance to have creative control and do our own album on our freshman effort. So that it kind of like entrenched us as leave them alone. They could do their own project. So that stuff worked out.
Timing was perfect too. I mean, Boyz II Men kind of led the way, but you've got Shai, you've got Guy. I mean, this is like a golden era of
Yeah,
art.
that era, it was serious.
And you all hit right there not at the top, because you helped kind of bring it further. You ratcheted it up from where it was to another level. But man, the timing was perfect.
And hip hop was like parallel to it, in this burgeoning like golden era phase, like during that time period. That was just, so they ran like right with each other. They like sharpened each other's steel. And then a lot of it kind of conflated after a while. Like the award shows didn't even know how to label it after a while.
Obviously, the group had lasting success. You weren't just a one and done. There wasn't just one CD. This is back in the era of BMG and Columbia House. So I ordered all the Shai CDs, and eventually they stopped coming. As with everything, the popularity peaks and that slows down. It changes. Tastes change. People move on as artists. Maybe you change. So from this meteoric rise to now what was that process like, going from R&B stardom to the season after that?
Yeah, well, like I saw the handwriting on the wall in a couple of different scenarios, like litmus test type scenarios, where I was like scratching my head like, that don't seem right. Like certain reactions, much like some guys, I guess you would know, like when you've been with maybe a female for a while and you have a certain reaction for certain things that you would do, and then maybe like some time into it, you do a thing, and then the reaction is lukewarm to kind of non-existence for something that used to be like, yo, so you start seeing like, so that kind of stuff started happening internally as well as the label, and that kind of thing kind of had an effect on the creativity as well as just lining up the ducks, logistics, it was so many different things that used to be seamless and streamlined that were now just all over the place, and a problem that used to, some things that were problems weren't even things to consider as problems before that, is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So it was compounded by a lot of other things. And, like you said, things run their course. We had some more stuff left in us, but the internal dynamics kind of curbed that from happening. Carl wanted to do his own thing, and, off the success, a lot of stuff. And he actually physically wrote the words to If I Ever Fall in Love. So he was ready to kind of like take that momentum and keep going with it as a writer producer guy. That's what he fancied, which had a disproportionate curve. Like that his thing was going up, I was going down in that regard. Like the more he pulled away, the people, and he had the writing credit, people didn't believe that the other three of us had the talent, which we did, because truth be told, Mark and Darnell musically were more musically inclined and had a lot more to do with the musical stuff in our Shai, as well as the harmonies and arrangement. So they didn't get the props during the time because they were team players, and Carl kind of had more savvy. He had a lot of stuff that he knew to write down and document and show paper trail from him. Us, we were just creating, and so we got caught up in the naivety in that moment too. Yeah. So it kind of bit us on the butt later on when we needed to go for self. We didn't have leverage. Yeah. So time went past. Darnell and I kept the group going. We had a few different members come in, because after a while, Mark was no longer in the group either. It was just me and Darnell and the originals. And we started doing shows over in Germany as a two-man group. Germany didn't care if it was 4 or 2 at the time. They just wanted to hear them songs. And because Darnell kind of like did the hook, and that sound was still generated. And, I got the gruff voice, and then the whole little thing behind Garfield or whatever that just happened with me personally, that has some little, social capital built into it, a little leverage going over there for people to see. I could rely on that a little bit. And, man, we just did our thing. We crafted a little 2-man chemistry, which we already had, but we kind of blew it up just so we could make sure our shows were more interesting. And man, we did that. We were doing these 2-man shows, and then we finally started getting believers, the promoters in the United States were hearing about, what you mean Shai performing? And then just 2 of them, you know what I'm saying? And like, yeah, they get over here killing it. So we started to get some shows in the United States as 2-man, and then we internally felt like it's cool doing these 2-man shows. It's fun because that's my guy, my best guy in the world. But the thrill of having that 4-part harmony, we started missing that. Right. So we ended up going back to the well, and those same dudes from the movie Lean on Me from Eastside High School, we got back to Riff, who are now, a lot of those members had gone to this group called Men of Vision, who did a couple of R&B songs, Housekeeper, a couple of R&B songs that people know of note. Mm-hmm. And we got G-Fly that was directly in Men of Vision, and then Dwayne, one of the guys from Riff from Men of Vision, and now they've been rocking with us for over a decade now. Like, just we've been doing 4-man shows. We got whole lot of shows all the way through February of next year booked already. It's just like been amazing. So we still just been keeping the torch going. People loving it, giving us the love. And so it's just been great.
So my daughter is a vocal performance major. She's soon to be a junior. And we did an interview, and she pointed out something that I never really recognized, that athletes and artists are more alike than different. And the competitive nature, the will to hone your craft, whether that's Kobe Bryant in a gym shooting 1,000 shots or a vocalist going over a riff 100 times or 1,000 times or whatever. And I see the parallels for most athletes eventually retire or their careers cut short by injury, whatever. But they kind of reach a point where they realize that, I'm not having the success I once had. It sounds like you kind of went through that to a certain extent, but then going international maybe brought the popularity back on the upswing. Was there ever a point where you felt like, I don't know if I can keep doing this anymore?
No, I couldn't even think that, because we knew we had classic songs. And what it really was, it's just like, this sounds crazy, but I knew, like, okay, so there was a time when our star was dimming and our trajectory was going down. And I felt it. It was that we weren't getting the shows because we weren't old school enough to be a thing yet, like a commodity in that way yet. We were like artists that were supposed to be current that just weren't getting the relevancy that we were supposed to be getting. So that negative curve at the time, I just knew it had to, it was like a bubble almost. It had to run its course. And then when time went past, I knew there was going to be a threshold moment, because our music was classic. Like if you look on YouTube, the Vivo was like at the time like 50 million. Like people were still interested in it. Like that 90s music never really ran its full course before the new stuff came in. It was kind of like it was still kind of there, but the new stuff was there too, taking precedent. And so just like a stock, a long range, long game stock, all of a sudden the window kind of opened up for now. The 90s was all of a sudden like how we used to look at the 70s. It was like a chic retro kind of thing to kind of be associated with, because it hosted so many good memories. And there's like, it's the word dessert. People usually don't have a negative connotation in their brain when they hear that word. It's like, oh yeah. And so like the 90s R&B was like, oh yeah. And so now that we were old school enough to be a commodity as an old school thing, traction picked up everywhere, because now it was hip to go back. It was like to go get like a retro kind of thing in 90s, which wasn't so far removed. And sound wise and sonically, it's still, even though it's different, there's still enough relatability in it where it's not so old school that people can't even relate to. Like, what is that? Like a payphone or something.
As Garfield talks, you can't help but notice that smooth sound. But there's more to it than that. He's a teacher, too. He frequently speaks in metaphor, and he tells his stories with an eloquence and an elegance that makes you want to keep listening, like a really good college professor. And there's a reason for that. He wasn't content with just simply being a founding member of one of the most iconic vocal groups of the 90s. Along the way, he managed to work in first a master's degree and eventually a PhD to become Dr. Bright. It's almost unfair that one person can have so much talent, ability, and drive all wrapped up into one package. But for Dr. Garfield Bright, it was just the next logical step on a growth journey that has seen him perform around the world while eventually becoming a recognized scholar, too.
It's still like some stuff that people hear their sample. Oh, I didn't know that was who sung that. Oh, I thought they was singing it. Oh, they sampled that? Or, it's like a thing like, oh, so that's who was singing that. I thought that was boys. Oh, that was Shai. It's a thing like, oh, I miss this music. And, and it really is a different kind of thing because of the harmonies, the group dynamic. Like today, you'd be hard pressed to find a group. And, just all of those. And just like you said, the vocal gymnastics, we really would sit there for hours and hours and practice blends and tones and things that now a vocoder or just something like an auto-tune could just easily just take care of, mitigate your lack of talent. We used to actually have a lot of talent in different areas, like, because it's different recording a song, that kind of talent, because your tone's got to be on a certain way. You can't really be singing full out doing background harmonies. You got to get a texture in there and layer them, and you kind of like got to sing certain parts, stack them 4 times, which means there can't be no flange. So you got to sing it the same way 4 times to get that nice full. Like, it's a lot of talent in just recording outside of singing live. And you got to kind of be ambidextrous with your skill set, have a bag that goes underrated because people just see the finished product. But now it's so quick fix, and everybody has in the machinery and toolery and the platform to create something, mix it and put it out. Right. The quality control might not be as deep as it was back when we didn't have all of those amenities that would enhance the vocals. It made us become artists for real. Not even if we didn't realize that's what we were. we wanted to sound a certain way. You got to put a certain kind of work in to get that sound. You can't just make that sound happen, especially in the analog days where it was cutting tape literally. And so, like shit.
Right. So your story really is disparate in so many ways because an R&B artist isn't moving in the same direction that someone earning a PhD is. I mean, you're touring the world, you're singing, you're doing the things that stars do, but you're also still actively pursuing higher education. So talk me through that side of you and your personality.
I know that must sound crazy. When I hear you say it, it sounds like ridiculous. But just for me, I'm a naturally inquisitive person. My father and mother were in the National Education Association and the Alabama Education Association. I started reading at an early age and all that kind of stuff. So, I was always touted as being like a smart guy. And so you go into, you fulfill that prophecy when you start hearing things at an early age enough. You kind of grow into it, especially when you get the support. And so I was always a good student. I was always a good athlete, and you needed good grades, and it was never a problem for me to make those grades. So I was like, cool. So I always got some out of putting my effort into school outside of just putting the effort in. But as I matured into it, I felt like I had a standard for myself in terms of how I wanted to purport myself and like be seen. And I wanted that gray matter part of me to be something that people noted, like not just the other side. People give me credit for being a handsome guy and that kind of thing. But I didn't want to be shallow. I didn't want to just be one-dimensional. I didn't want to be a big Jethro walking around. You know what I mean? So I really took pride into anything that made me think, anything that I would do to make others think and create dialogues that were interesting and one of a kind. I took excessive pride the same way I approach harmonies in that real curious way. And I had this like obsessive compulsion to create a harmony. I would also have like an obsessive compulsion to distill, like to answer questions and to distill thought, like from anything. I would create questions to try to like find deeper answers. Even my cognition, like a metacognitive thing, like why am I thinking? Like I was always trying to get to the source of like, where did language come from? Like, what is water actually? Like, I was always into a different mode of thinking. And so for me, getting a PhD was just me and my trajectory, my matriculation, just trying to get a terminal degree because that was the highest you can go. I wanted to challenge my intelligence factor to see if I could hang. And I didn't do it necessarily for reasons of like having people call me Dr. Bright or anything like that. It wasn't like for those vain status reasons. A lot of people see me walking the streets would never even know the way I am. But in terms of my gray matter, my mind and the concepts that I want to deal with, because I'm always looking to explain what's around me. And if I can get a better, nomenclature, a better handle on how to express it, the idea chamber can open up and wrap itself around higher concepts. So I've always been one of those people that wanted to know more. I'm not satisfied with what we know now, and I still am not, even with the PhD. But I didn't do it to, like I said, to be some kind of commercially viable dude in that way. It was just really, I was just seeking more knowledge, and I landed into a spot, and I kept it going, and I found out that I was good at it. I had a 4.03 GPA. My dissertation won an award for outstanding, dissertation. So did my master's thesis. And I found out, you find things out about yourself under that type of duress, because it really is. You alienate family, friends. People don't understand the time that you put into it. They think, oh, you can make time for things you want to make time for. Right. Like usually that rule holds true, but in this situation, it dominates your existence if you want to be good at it. Yep. And, the conferences, and accountability ethic, all the different stuff that keep you up at night, just the organizational aspect of it. And then the people aspect of it, like, especially when I had to pick my committee, like the politics aspect of picking a committee outweighs by far the content that you think you're talking about in terms of what's important in that moment. And so little things like that, how do you know that coming into the ways that I grew in terms of my PhD are immeasurable in terms of like how you see it manifested on the outside in my everyday space. People think you get PhD, you teach college and get paid. Like me, there were a lot of life things, just like how team sports was a metaphor for like life and using your team and delegating responsibility. It's the same thing in a PhD and a master's program. If you're in one that's good, it's like trial by fire. Yep. And there's no easy way to get through it. So
I can certainly relate. I was a first generation college student myself, and you get that bachelor's and you're like, all right, what's next? And then you do that, you get the master's. All right, what's next? And it just always felt like, if it's there, I want to chase it.
Right.
If I can chase it and I can grow in the process. And what a lot of people don't understand about a PhD is it's not about breadth at all. It's about depth. It's about getting really, really dialed into one specific thing. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I tell doctoral students all the time, the hardest part is getting your 5 committee members in the room at the same time for your meetings, because that is a challenge. And then getting them to return your writing with some sort of.
And to even deal with each other, like that part, like knowing enough about them to know if they like each other or not.
Yeah.
Before you go get them just on paper because they're the best methodologists or they're the best. You got to be a GM. You got to be a GM in that situation. Right. You really do.
Never heard it described that way, but you're absolutely right. You
got to be a GM, man. Quit playing.
Team together for sure. So you're also, your creative pursuits spill over into authorship. Tell me about your book, Lotus 30.
Yeah, Lotus 3013. I'm proud of it. And because I'm such an old school dude in terms of the technology stuff, like I never, like I know my Mac back and forth, and my Mac, I'm good on the Mac, but just in general, as a techie, I'm whack. And so I need a website built because I'm not selling it through Amazon. I'm gonna sell it basically to my Instagram followers. I got enough followers, I think, that as an audience, that could be enough people to kind of like check it out. And then after a while, I put it on Amazon. But it's a book, if you can mix Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and like Beat Street, which was a hip hop movie back in the 90s, or late 80s rather. Those 3, you'll get Lotus. In the year 3013, hip hop is believed to be a white cultural invention with no strands. It's like totally ahistorical. It's a dystopian book, Afrofuturistic type of thing. And it's a guy named Master Set, who's the forces of evil, the Satilians. And he really wants to trap people into a perpetual present so he can create a narrative that they keep reinventing and keep repopulating, keep reiterating. But in their mind, there's the illusion of futureness happening. But he's got their mind in such a trap. They keep repeating the present over and over again. And in that present, the relevancy of Black creativity is at a low point. And there's a high penile system. And it's a lot to it, man. And it's a real interesting read, I say the least. You know, it's fantasy based, like I said. And so, but it's not too out there with the powers. It's kind of believable. And it's a pretty good book, you know. And my sons, who are Grammy nominated producers, did the score. Like I have an ebook and I have an audio book, and the audio book is like, you know, like just in scenes where the music comes inside of the scenes and builds the momentum and it moves. I have that in this audio book, man, and it feels like a movie, you know. So it's once I get the right tech guy to just create their website where once they buy it, the link can get to the right person without them passing it to other people. And I don't know how to do all that, but I need that done. And that's all I'm waiting on.
Definitely put links and your socials and stuff in the notes. So what's been the mountaintop for you through all this journey, whether academia, whether R&B stardom? What was the high point?
Man, for me, like the meta, when I'm up close to myself traveling through life, I'm not registering events or things that happen in terms of the high or lowness of them. I'm in the moment in a problem solution kind of mode, maybe something like that. And so I would tend to remember how things feel rather than remember what the actual events that I went through were. Like I remember the range of, or the amalgam of different things that I felt, but I can't remember what they were tied to specifically sometimes. And so when I get asked that kind of question, it forces me to go back to a specific time frame. And I'm whack when it comes to recording life like that. Like it's always right now for me. Like I have future feelings, but I've been in my life and how I've lived so far, it seemed like no matter what I've tried to do, I've always been carried to a place and I just freely let it happen. And then I just make the best of it. And next thing you know, here I am in some high level of some space that I never asked to be in. So I'm not scared to let life take me places, I guess. And because I've been successful at it, I now own that and be like, I don't want to like try to like control my thing too much. You know what I'm saying? So because I think like that, the moments that are probably high moments, which of course happen, my sons and my children and things like that, I'm getting married. But the way I recorded them in the moment was just a part of this trajectory that's all good, all special. Yeah. Like this is part of defining. I'm living. I'm going through, because I was in low moments. I was homeless before. But even in them times, man, I felt like Rocky or something. Like I had a feeling of like I always feel protected. I don't feel like nothing's really ever really gone bad that happened to me to a point that I can't handle. Mm-hmm. I just got to go through it. And I always feel like I'm gonna land on my feet. So I don't let myself take it too seriously, even if it's something that in that moment is like, this hurts, this sucks. Yeah. But I know there's gonna be a day when I'm gonna be back on top, because the nature of the universe is a wave. And energy travels like in waveforms. Yeah. So there's an arch, there's a crest, and then there's a trough to it all, and then there's a mean. And if I could stay closer to the mean, even in my up downs, I should be cool. You know what I'm saying? So I just try to, do that if I can.
So I've done a lot of interviews of high achievers, Olympians, NFL athletes, NBA artists. And the thing that consistently stands out to me is it's almost the curse of the high achiever is you're so focused on the achievement or doing your best in the moment that it's hard to take time to fully appreciate what you're doing, what you're achieving or accomplishing. And so I think for the listeners, a lot of times it's valuable to hear that if there's a regret for a lot of high achievers, it's that they didn't take just that moment to stop and smell the roses. When your group was awarded New Artist of the Year or when you're touring the world, there's always this drive to be like, you're going to compare yourself to another group or you're trying to meet sales records or whatever. And sometimes it's a thief that robs you of the joy of recognizing what we are in the midst of right now, what we are accomplishing.
Man, I was like that even in my educational side. When I got my master's in African American studies, like I never took my diploma out the thing. I never hung it up anywhere because in my mind, that's not where I was trying to end up. I was going to get this PhD and I needed to get through that phase to go to the next. So in my mind, that was like the baby step. Like, yeah, okay, cool. You know what I mean? But in a lot of people's mind, like, yo, bro, you know. And so I've always just kind of been like that. I don't know. And it's not like a thing of where I'm devaluing it or I'm looking at it even condescending, anything like that. It's just that I'm so on a quest in a lot of ways that I'm not ever satiated by some plateau part of the travel. Like, that's a point. Like, I remember when we got our Image Award, I was happy as hell that night. And I was mad that they only gave us one trophy for the group. I was like, are y'all crazy? And so because I was so happy about it, they was like, all right, G, you get to keep it. So I still had an Image Award. And then we got our platinum plaques. When we first, I had seen so many dope artists that I looked up to, like Teddy Riley and people like that with platinum plaques in their homes. And I was like, yo, I want one of those. And then when we finally got a platinum flag, I felt validated. Like, now that's something.
Right.
I'm looking at my name on this platinum. Like, I did that. You know, those are moments. When we did the Budweiser Superfest, the first night on tour, on an official tour with a tour bus and the whole routing system and the magazines that they give you with all your tour dates in them, with all the ancillary detail. Like the tour, like going on my first real tour, and I was one of the stars of a tour. That was dope. You know what I mean? Like that. There's a lot of high moments, but they're all part of just a high continuum. Like I say, they're all part of this thing, if I can call it that, the bonus round of the video game time, like that. And in that time, there were a lot of details that I remember, and there was a lot of stuff I don't, because just the overall feeling of that was, wow, this is great. But I know this is not life real. This is not going to be this way forever. But this is great.
Yeah.
And because of that, when it wasn't like this forever, I'm cool. I can adjust because I saw that in that way for what it was, you know. But I don't remember all the, like when people start telling us little things, like, remember we was at the such and I was like, oh yeah, huh? Oh yeah. Like, you know, I didn't record it like that going through it at all.
It's hard to let things like that register because you almost feel like it's going to somehow dampen your momentum. Like if I just get complacent in the here and now, then I'm not chasing after what could be my bigger destiny.
Man, I was just trying to keep up. Forget chasing. I was just trying to, like, life was going so fast in those moments, and we were expected to do so much in so little time and to be so on in such a fabricated kind of way that thank God we had some talent, because when you go on a tour bus after the show and you wake up at 5 a.m. in the next city, and then by 6:30 a.m. you sing an acapella for all the people driving to work. You just woke up out the tour bus bed and you ain't go to the hotel yet, and you singing at the top of your lungs at 6:30 in the morning, and then you got to go to a meet and greet, then you got to go to this, and then sound check, and then do the show, and then go to the after party and get on the tour bus, and then be back up at 6 o'clock in the morning for the radio. When you got like straight, like almost a year's worth of just that over and over and over and over and over, the reality of that style of being sets in. A lot of the people on the outside have no idea, like, that type of commitment, and just to stay afloat. Yeah. Like, let alone be good at it. Like, just to be, like, I like in that part of the industry, you know, in terms of the complexities of just catching up to hockey. I often ask people, hey man, what you think is the most difficult sport to play? Like, which set of skill sets, you know, is the most difficult to master just to be able to play, let alone be good, but just to play. And I always end up, my contribution to that is always hockey. The ice skating that you have to be able to do, the dexterity with that puck and that stick, the toughness you have to have just to be on the ice with people ready to just beat you up at all times, and then all the other things, that master skater. Like, that's a hard sport to just be able to play, let alone then with those skills be good at it.
Yeah.
And so I look at being in the industry like that. Like, there's a lot of things you got to be able to manage just to stay afloat. Because if you just willy-nilly, you will be dehydrated and just run into the ground by the scheduling of it all. If you let yourself get too high or too down, your adrenaline keeps getting emptied every day on that clip. That's going to exhaust you. Like, if you're drinking too much, along with all that other stuff and doing whatever, like, you're going to run yourself raggedy. Right. And as a young person, you ain't even thinking about nothing like that because you think you're young and everything works. So all this, it's a lot going on that the people who enjoy the artists don't get to really see in terms of what they go through to stay just on par. Right. So, yeah, I was catching up, man. We was never ahead of the game. I was always trying to swim and catch up to where I was supposed to be.
Yeah, understood. So that's a great segue into one of the last questions here. What advice would you have given younger you? If you could go back in time and speak some sage wisdom into 7-8-year-old Garfield, what would you tell him?
Well, that guy was too young for what I wanted to tell him. Maybe that Garfield that was like 17, right before, maybe a couple of years before he's going to get a record deal, just to let him know that, yes, man, this is the music business. That business aspect of the game, if at all, you can be as well-versed as possible in what royalties look like, publishing splits. What's the proper gauge for what a manager should get in terms of percent when they coming at you with, like, if you could just kind of situate yourself and steep yourself into the body of knowledge that speaks to the record business before you sign a contract or get faced with the prospect of signing a contract. Then you'll make a more informed decision. You might even have some kind of angle that will allow you to just, kind of mitigate all the trauma that's going to be behind you realizing that as soon as you give birth to what you think is a piece of art, it becomes product and you become a product maker from an artist to a product maker. Wow. And the product maker is owned. The artist owns themselves in their mind, but they're attached to this product that monetarily speaking is part of a bottom line. Ergo, you are type, you own. Like, so if you can process all that in advance and then have a way to kind of mitigate that, one, to save face when you go to sleep at night, knowing that you can still face yourself without selling yourself out to the demands of what this product is making you do. But then also just to know the ins and outs of what's, like knowing your rights. When somebody pulls you over, if you know your rights, you're going to be, if you can say, excuse me, officer, you don't have reasonable articulable suspicion. You can't get my ID if I'm just a passenger in the car, if I haven't been observed doing a crime or running from the scene, or like if you know certain things, the cops have to just leave you alone. If you know certain things come into a negotiation with a contract off the top about what your royalties and your splits are, you'll see BS as soon as it presents itself. You can get that out the way immediately, and then they have to come with something more respectable. Like those kinds of things. I would tell my younger self, become more business savvy at an earlier age and move like that anytime you're in a corporate or any kind of capitalistic venture, because it's going to behoove you to be that way.
Yeah, that's powerful. Part of you is so excited to jump into this.
Yeah, I got a deal. I got a record deal. You know what I'm saying? I got my artist, man. What? Yeah. I want a label. What?
Yeah.
But
and predators smell that coming, so they want to take advantage of you.
It's already asymmetrical off the top because they're coming to you with the contract. You have to then take that and get the best out of it by getting a lawyer, attorney to try to just milk something for you to create any kind of win-win on that. But that's skewed in their direction from the beginning because they presenting it. You don't come to them with a contract talking about, hey, let's do a record deal. Right. As an artist, you come with your own contract. I get this is what I want. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I ask this of all my guests. I love music and the emotions that it can represent. What song would you pick as the soundtrack of the montage of your life, and why?
I'll pick it's two of them that go together, and I can't avoid them. The first one, Made Voyage by Herbie Hancock, VSOP Quintet. That one, and then by the middle of it, it'll have to segue into Giant Steps by John Coltrane.
Nice.
That would have to be the. And then I might just I might have to end with Naima by Coltrane. Like that's like that melody is so melancholy, but it's so rich and reflective and retrospective. Do, 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 those notes make you kind of like think and like look back on what you've accomplished. Those 3 songs, and I'm, and that's all jazz, but that shows you how dominant jazz is. Because I love Stevie Wonder. That's my favorite guy. And I could have picked all kind of songs by him or Donny Hathaway or Marvin Gaye. But for some reason, like Miles and Train and Ahmad Jamal and Stanley Tarantine and just Thelonious, just all those guys, the spiritual stuff coming out of that instrument that they do, man, it just hits me. So yeah, Herbie with Maiden Voyage, then John Coltrane with Giant Steps, and then I will close out with Naima.
Nice. So I dropped these into a Spotify shared playlist that has all of my guests' songs. So the Becoming Undone soundtrack will include those 3 cuts.
Yay!
Yeah. So last one, what for you remains undone?
What for me remains undone? Oh, every day there's you never arrive, man. You can't. If you arrive, you just so self-centered if you think you've arrived, because life is always presenting things that I'm trying to master, man. Like, I really think there's so much more to this experience than the structures that we've been in terms of our formal education and what's been placed on our radar in terms of what people tell us is important. And we have so many more powers that are in our being as humans. And I mean, literally, like, there's like certain things that I'm starting to learn now with tempo and pace of conversation, and with people, you can inject ideas in people's idea pool as they're speaking. If you find out the cadence, and when they do a pause, they're searching. If you can kind of like inject the idea, yours will be more glossy to them, and they'll pick you. Like, you can control conversations mentally about certain things, but you can't never express to them that you did that because you'll lose the momentum. But there's a lot to power. There's a lot of magnetic power that we have, and a lot of stuff to us that if we listen to ourselves and stuff, we can learn. And I'm so intrigued by that aspect of how to do human. I think that we needed to pay way more attention to that stuff. And I'm a PhD. I went to, I educated the hell out of myself. But even that, I don't really think that's as important as the pattern recognition that I learned, as the people skills in terms of relationship, what makes people tick, and the psychological things that I kind of picked up. More than the content, doing human, like philosophically, what makes you tick and move, and why do we react in certain ways, and how is capital has been able to entrench itself so hardcore into our zone, and create this exclusivity and this fake competition, this misinterpretation of opposites as versus mode instead of complementary, like all these different things. I look at that and I'm like, man, it could be so much different with a different kind of programming, which is all that education is, to bring out of somebody, but you putting in certain patterns in people that are getting validated. They'll reflect those over time. If they're made out of noble things, people will reflect that. Society is acting a certain way because it's being programmed that way. Period. Yeah. And we can change that. My point is, we can change that. Not be conspiracy theories. Nothing. I'm just looking for better outcomes. And how do you get that? We can just reprogram ourselves, man.
Well, you got my vote, Dr. Bright. Whenever you decide to run,
I can never be in politics, man.
No, me neither. So how can listeners connect with you and follow what you're doing and support your work?
The Instagram is at the Garfield Bright, and that's also holds true for Facebook. TikTok, I think it's the same thing, the Garfield Bright, and Shai 90s Official. And then we have a Shai a page called Shiroglyphics, which is, SHAI for Shai, and then Roglyphics, RO glyphics. Mm-hmm. And so those ways you can check out what we're doing in terms of shows on the Shai pages, and then on my pages as well. Like I just started doing the Cameo, where you can, with people who want me to say hi to family members or something for a holiday, like make a pre-recorded video and send it. They can find me on Cameo now. Mine is cheap. I'm only charging $50. I saw some exorbitant rates. People like $20,000 and $15,000. Wow. I was like, man. But I'm just doing $50, man.
I will drop all those links in the show notes so that people can have that. This could have gone a lot longer for me, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I really appreciate you dropping in.
My name is Garfield Bright, and I am undone, y'all.
So about that wedding thing again. My wife and I got married in 1997, and we had asked my best man, who was a talented musician, to play Together Forever, our favorite Shai song. He agreed to do so, And as the wedding drew near, a day or two before, he said, "Oh, by the way, I didn't have a chance to practice that song. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to play an original." It was a worship song that had nothing to do with romance or being together forever. So we missed out on having Shai at our wedding, but we made a memory. For Dr. Garfield Bright, it's been quite a ride. From sensational R&B superstar to award-winning researcher, everywhere he's gone and everything he's done, he's found a path to success with a confidence and a determination that has helped him literally will his dreams into reality. And he's not done yet. Aside from the fact that I have never been more self-conscious of my voice as when paired with his for this interview, I'm so thankful for the opportunity to connect, and I hope you found as much inspiration and motivation from his story as I have. For more info on today's episode, be sure to check it out on the web. Simply go to undonepodcast.com/EP51 to see the notes, links, and images related to today's guest, Garfield Bright. I know there are great stories out there to be told, and I'm always on the lookout. So if you or someone you know has a story that we can all be inspired by, tell me about it. Surf on over to undonepodcast.com, click the contact tab in the top menu, and drop me a note. Coming up, I've got fitness business legend Pat Rigsby and the incredible story of Shelby Perry, CEO and founder of iHesive. Then an unbelievably powerful story of former college football player turned motivational speaker Fletcher Cleaves. So stay tuned. This and more coming up on Becoming Undone. Becoming Undone is a Nitro Hype creative production written and produced by me, Toby Brooks. If you or someone you know has a story of resilience and victory to share for Becoming Undone, contact me at undonepodcast.com. Follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Becoming Undone Pod. And follow me at Toby J. Brooks on Twitter or X, Instagram, and TikTok. Listen, subscribe, and leave us a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, everybody, keep getting better.